Hello everyone, hello world, welcome to PocketGamer.biz. This time a little bit different, everything is different. This time I'm getting over a cold, so I'm not at my desk. I am in my kitchen, which I am told looks a little bit like an Irish pub, but I love it. And my co-host, Brian Baglow, the one, the only, my partner in crime. He isn't here this week. He is speaking at Electric Games at the Adelaide Fringe. Sounds like an awesome event. He's probably having a great time and no doubt bringing back lots of speakers for the show. Speaking of the show, who do I have as my co-host? Well, I didn't want to do it on my own. So I have my cat, Whiskey. And if you're listening in on audio podcast, he's a very mellow, this is his afternoon nap time, very mellow tabby cat. And he will be keeping me company today. So I'm not alone, and we'll send a big greeting to Brian, shall we? No, he's not up to that. Okay, so we won't send Brian love and kisses, but we do think of him. And getting on with the show, what do we have for you today? Well, we were all at PGC London very recently and getting ready for PGC Seattle. So we kick off with some takeaways and some top highlights from the show in London. And to do that, we have the team, which is awesome. So in addition to Brian Baglow and myself, we have Daniel Griffiths, who is the editor at Steel Media. We have Dave Bradley, COO at Steel Media, and the one, the only, the man, Chris James, our CEO at Steel Media, all weighing in on what impressed them most at this very impressive show. So you won't want to miss that. And right after that, well, we cut away to an interview I did during the show, a little bit of guerrilla journalism, catching up with and hanging out with Daniel Helmhold, who is the VP of Growth, Head of Marketing at Big Fish Games, and he tells us all about building brand and how to measure the impact on LTV, something you won't want to miss, top topic for studios everywhere. And I will not say that Whiskey is extremely excited about this segment, but I am, so let's let it roll.
So, Chris, I'm seeing you first on the screen. Give us that elevator pitch of how amazing you are.
Of how amazing I am. Wow. I'm CEO of Steel Media. I set this whole thing up about 15 years ago, and I'm super proud of what it's become. We've been championing the mobile games industry for 16 plus years now, and the wider games industry. And I couldn't be proud of what we've achieved and the incredible team I've built, or we've built around this business. So, I just try and run things, really. That's what I do. Try and keep it all going. Perfect.
Keeps the trains running. Daniel.
Hi there. I'm the editor of PocketGamer.biz, and I work with our faithful newshound team, hoovering up what's new, all the data, all the facts, all the moves, all the appointments, all the hires, all the mergers and acquisitions, and turning that into raw, fun, easily digestible fact day in, day out for the site.
Dave, tell us about yourself.
Dave Bradley. I'm the COO of Steel Media, and I've been working here at the company on the editorial and marketing and event side of things since 2016. And I've been a journalist and editor for 25 years. And again, I started in the games world with a detour into film and TV. But games are a passion of mine, and mobile games is particularly exciting. And the events, I actually started attending Pocket Gamer Connects events before I was working for the company. I came along to as a civilian to see the magic, and what can I say? It hooked me, and now I attend every single one.
Anyone who's ever been to one of the Pocket Gamer Connects events knows it's the jewel in the crown, the part of the Steel Media that gets out there and really engages with the wider industry. But am I right in saying this was the biggest PGC London ever, guys?
Yeah, it was. This was over 2,600 attendees, and that was kind of live ticket holders across the 2 days. Yeah, biggest by a bit of a margin, actually. Biggest on pretty much every front. Probably had the most tracks as well of content, and certainly had the most meetings. I think there's over
Yeah, thousands of meetings, 31 different track topics across the stages, and I think, Chris, is it 1,200 companies?
Yeah, it's over
we
1,200
identified?
companies. I mean, what I think is a special sauce about us, and what I've always tried to maintain, is it's a cross industry thing. It's the whole ecosystem thing. It's not just about a few of the top guys. It's about bringing everybody from the student devs and the indie devs through the kind of publishers, the AAA guys, the investors, service companies, tool makers, media. We want to be a real slice of the whole industry.
Didn't we identify that 50% of the attendees at this event in London were from the UK, which is gratifyingly international? It means that half of the attendees who came to our conference in January travelled from overseas to be there, and that's a testament, I think, to the thing that we built.
One thing you said was, yes, big numbers, but also big ideas, big topics. What struck you amongst the big ideas? What stood out?
It's interesting over the years how we've kind of expanded beyond the mobile space as well. I know Pocket Gamer is synonymous with mobile gaming, and there's a clue in the name as well, which is obviously the first thing people see. But actually, we've introduced over the years PC and console. To your point, Peggy, as well, about things that sort of stood out. I noticed that, you can see every year topics that emerge, and maybe a couple of years ago, everyone was talking about blockchain games, where that was going, and there was still a little bit of that. It seemed to me, whatever track I was on, people kept bringing up AI as this year's hot topic. And so based on what I saw at Pocket Gamer Connects London 2023, I'm kind of expecting the games industry to be all about AI this year, because everyone had a hot take on it on whatever stage that we were on. In fact, we introduced a whole AI track, but to do that, but still, even on some of the more traditional kind of gaming tracks elsewhere, people were talking about AI. And
because we had 31 different kind of themed tracks, not all of them massive tracks, but we cover everything. I mean, we cover everything from the artistry of games, the ideation, how you run your company, how you raise money, to a lot of the business issues. Like how do you monetize, how do you grow your business? AI has just kind of come up quietly. I mean, people have been talking about it, but it's coming quietly without any of that sort of furore in the same way. If the blockchain's had 2 years, I was raising crazy amounts of money, and AI is just coming and gone. Yeah, we're changing things right now, and already, whether it's people running sample ad campaign tests, where it's people creating graphics in game, where it's people creating a sort of even scripts and content, or doing mock-ups or prototypes, even checking code. So much there's so many ways where AI is being experimented with and tried, even come down to ideation. There's a company they've got an interesting angle, because they use AI to basically create concepts and create ideas for your game right at the start. So it's AI, like Dave said, we had a dedicated track, but it came up on not every track, but it came up on a lot of different places as the thing that is changing the games industry one way or another.
The overall vibe, every time AI was mentioned, it's mentioned a heck of a lot in the chats that I was having. Everyone's very excited by the possibilities that allows, as regards sort of leveling up for developers from a small size. So there's a very big deal in employing more people to produce assets for games. It's a consideration that they have to take very, very carefully. And the feeling is that the giants, the big games makers, they've got the big studios, they can afford to churn out multiple products, multiple iterations of stuff. And the small guys, really need to take it very, very carefully to avoid heading into trouble really, really early on. And they see AI rather as this fantastic leveling opportunity for them to go in and be as powerful as the big guys with much, much smaller teams. Years and years ago, I went to a big development studio, I don't know whether I should name them or not, and they were finishing the sequel to their amazing game. And the guy was saying, we've had to...
Name the game, and then you build something.
He was saying to me that we've had to employ 150 extra artists in the crush to finish this game. And he had this enormous room. And while he was talking, I was watching the guy over his shoulder, and he was picking up a tree, and he's putting it on a map. So he had a palette of trees and a landscape, and he's putting the trees on one by one. So for me, pressing a button in AI and it puts the trees on, brilliant. This guy wouldn't have had to employ 150 people and wouldn't have had to spend millions and sweat about whether his game was going to be finished in time. So for that, it's opening the doors.
There's another interesting thing about the way that we might experience games in the future as well. Guy Gadney from Charisma AI was talking about how maybe we're reaching the end of traditional in-game conversation dialogue trees, for instance, because and I love all that. I play a lot of role-playing games like Mass Effect and so on. But why do you need a tree to choose dialogue options if the game can just speak English and respond to your with natural language? And there's options like that are going to become increasingly easy to integrate in.
Now, this is interesting because I think the games industry, despite being constantly driven forward by technology, can sometimes be a little shy when it comes to new tech. But as Daniel just said, it's going to help the smaller studios find those efficiencies. In the podcast, we've just spoken to a whole bunch of companies out there who are using AI and automation for things like customer support, for quality assurance, for really making sure that your player journey is as flawless as possible without necessarily having to outsource your community management, without having to go to the third parties. So I think it's going to be within the application. It's where it's used. I think we are going to see some major changes.
The way I see AI is it's just a whole new tool set. And maybe it's democratizing. It might be to a degree, and maybe it enables better games or deeper games or bigger worlds. But it's just a new tool set to play with.
I want to pick up on that thought because you talk about it being a whole new tool set. And I was hearing discussions also in some of the, behind the scenes discussions, just like chatting with people saying, well, now we need a whole new skill set as well. And it brings back, for a lot of people, they were very excited because then it's not necessarily the hard skills, but the soft skills come back now too. It's going to be about not just understanding the tools, but co-creating with the tools. You don't want them just to go off, to Daniel's point. You want them to assist with that process. Go ahead, move the trees over, but don't come up with the whole concept. That's going to be what everyone was saying, even in your interview with HelpShift, Brian. Let the people make their games. Let the tools assist.
Well, you still need ideas and you still need creation. You still need, it's going to be about content's going to be easier to create, volume of it, but it's going to be much more about what you don't include and what you kind of throw away and the choices you make, I think, going forward.
The tool itself is fascinating for all other things because what it's great at is analyzing data very quickly in a way that we can understand. So, for instance, if you're running a game that has, it's live ops and you have millions of players and you're getting loads of different feedback from them and customer comments in loads of different form, reading through all of those and deciding what your actions and outcomes are is very hard, but actually an AI can do that very quickly. So giving the AI loads of data of customer feedback and going, what are people thinking about our game, and having it summarized in 3 sentences is actually very actionable and very easy and not taking anyone's job. It's just speeding up kind of the process. And I love that stuff about it. Just anecdotally, by the way, I know we've all played with things like ChatGPT. I got told off by ChatGPT for the first time yesterday. I asked it to predict the outcome of a nuclear war given current nation stockpiles of weapons and things. And it told me it was an irresponsible question and that I shouldn't be asking questions like that. I should instead be turning my attention to the role of peace.
You have seen the film Terminator.
Which I was going to say, which is, by the way, exactly what I would expect Skynet to say.
Don't you worry about that. That could never happen.
on the game creation side of stuff, I just think that the humans are going to have to work harder. I think there is a risk, in inverted commas, that if AI points everyone in the same direction, you're going to have to go in a slightly different direction to stand out. So I think there is opportunity there for humans to really kind of to still drive this forward and to make a difference. Spotting when the AI is saying, "Oh, trust me, you just need to do this," and you've been able to say, I think you're telling this to everyone. I think everyone's going to do that. So therefore, I'm going to be original and I'm going to do something different. So there is certainly still plenty of human input in there.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because it's only once the tools get into the hands of the general population that they figure out what they're going to do with it. It's only once these tools are out there that we can really get a sense. Will everybody become their own game creator?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, the games industry is bigger than it's ever been, and there's probably more. Well, there's definitely more games being made than ever before because you've got so many things like hyper casual stuff. But the appetite for games doesn't seem to be abating. So I do wonder at what point we get to saturation point. But then there are also mobile games, like Clash of Clans or Clash Royale or Honor of Kings or even Candy Crush and stuff like that. Been around for a decade now, and still are getting a massive audience kind of playing them. And and people are still trying. One of the big problems in mobile is trying to launch a new game. Even the big guys struggle to get. That's why there's so much consolidation. Another topic we had at the event and which is predicted to continue, even though people think that investment money might dry up a little bit. They're also slow a little bit rather than dry up. The consolidation's just going to keep going on because people launching a new idea and a new game in is so hard to get traction in mobile. Most of these games now are service games, not all of them, but a lot of them are games as a service. So Fortnite's still going to be there rolling on, and PUBG, and on the console side, and FIFA. All these things are still going to be going on. So trying to get in and get attention away from them as well as to new game is a challenge.
No, Chris, to your point, I think there definitely is a discovery crisis, particularly since, in the aftermath of the changes to IDFA and Apple's ATT and so on. Actually standing out and advertising your game is hard. It was always, the cost of user acquisition was growing the whole time anyway, and so it was hard for smaller companies to compete with the bigger companies. But now it's got even harder for games companies to target individuals. I think we'll see the topics that I saw on stage were things like we'll see hyper casual games companies struggling because one of their models was just constantly promoting the next game to people and so on, and that's becoming harder. User acquisition is harder, and I think we're still kind of yet to see how that discovery crisis is.
One of the things that at the show that I was interested in was the number of tracks that were about sort of building community in an established game and sustaining your game. Coming from a world where you would release the game and then you would kill it, then you'd release a sequel, then you'd kill it. I find it fascinating these days that people are all about keeping a game going, keeping with events, with special offers, with seasonal stuff happening within the game, creating something that can last 10, 12, 15 years. I think it's incredible. And suddenly a game isn't so much like a movie as like something like EastEnders or something. You could just rumble on forever as long as you keep it fresh. Looking after the game becomes about keeping your audience happy and keeping them coming back. And then, what greater achievement is there than having an audience that absolutely loves what it is that you're making. So
mobile, it's with you all the time. So I'm on a train. I'm in the bathroom. I'm just want a break for 5 minutes during work to a little mini reward rather than eating again a snack at home. So I don't know. I think that's really the amazing things. It's kind of changed how we think about games a bit as well, and the session lengths. You're playing for 10. Been playing a game for 10 years. You might only play like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Every other day or something. But that's all you need to keep you kind of keep you going with it.
That's part of the power of this, Chris. It's the fact that it's in everybody's pocket. It's there alongside the social media channels. It's there alongside YouTube, Spotify, etc. It's kind of taken away a lot of the stigma. Back when some of us, maybe all of us, although I won't speak for you, Peggy, wanted to play a game, you had to have a chunk of hardware in your house that played games. And, games are now ubiquitous. Anything with a screen and some processing power, the chances are there are games on there and that games will be the most popular type of content.
Brian, to your point there, absolutely. And I think cloud gaming is another topic that surfaces at Pocket Gamer Connects. And absolutely, we're seeing the fact that you can effectively outsource the processing of the game to a remote server and it comes straight to you. It means everything is now a gaming device, absolutely. And I think we're seeing more of that. I mean, it's changed the way I consume games on my Xbox, the fact that I can dive in and sample a game instantly on cloud gaming, but the fact that now smart TVs can be gaming devices, the fact that you can play high fidelity console games on your mobile phone because it's using a cloud service to render the game is an extraordinary advance over the last couple of years.
The interesting thing is where games and mobile games or other games hit the wider world. Like, so we had Netflix obviously have come into games. They were there speaking and talking. They bought game studios. They're leasing into that. But we also had United Airlines were there, giving a talk, I think, about how they see games and how that's part of their engagement with their consumers. That's something to keep them entertained on the flight and also to touch base with them when they come off the flight and keep that relationship with them. And that idea about games becoming the most popular thing on different platforms and sort of co-opting other platforms is absolutely true.
And to your point, I've just written an article actually for you, Daniel, that you have, which is looking at what the actual games companies are saying. And there was this fantastic quote where it was like, if you launch a game, you launch it mobile first, and then you take it to the other platforms, because that allows you to test your concept, you get your creatives right, all the rest of it. But mobile first for games, that really is a first.
Interesting.
We agree on the trends here. AI was exciting, but let's talk about the wow moment at the show.
Just seeing the crowd around the building. I'm sure security wouldn't agree with me, but it was just fantastic. The turnout was amazing. I mean, just find the meeting area at the show. There's so many tables, and they look like a sea of tables when they're empty. You just think, well, we're never going to fill this. And the amount of they were packed all day, every day. People discussing, people showing games, people doing deals. This kind of half a football pitch area of transaction and handshaking going on. So I can only imagine the amount of money that changed hands, the amount of deals that were done. Because that meeting area, that was something else.
We are trying to find ways to get some metrics around that. So we're asking some people, we're trying to apply what we know, and it's very hard because no one's going to give us all their term sheets and the deals they've signed or whatever. But we think the volume of kind of deals that have started or engaging is going to, based on what we've had back from very small sample size, admittedly, is easily going to be in the hundreds of millions.
Referencing the kind of the spirit of the event again, I think it is important to note how much it's grown as well. When the event started, we were looking at maybe 500 or 600 people in London, and now we're on 2,000 more people than that. So the event has certainly grown in less than 10 years. It started out with its event in London in 2014, its first event, but we now run events in Helsinki, in Hong Kong, in Jordan. We've done a load of work in the Middle East in the last 12 months. And we will again this year. We've run events in Bangalore. We've run events in America and Canada. And you see that a lot of that growth in the events has come from people traveling to be part of the events. And it has a real international feel, and looks not just at the local games industry, but the global games industry. And of course, having just come out of London, at the PGC London, we're now looking to take the roadshow back on the road. We're off to Seattle in a few months time, which will be another exciting opportunity to do what we do on the other side.
Any
of the
way
Atlantic.
to get a little peek into that? Dave, Chris, Daniel, what's coming? Interesting tracks.
We'll be leaning more into AI. We will look at what's the local issues there as well. I mean, one of the things we're working on at the moment, we haven't quite finalised how we're doing it, but there's been a lot of layoffs. Despite the general positivity in the industry, tech as a whole, as just I think in a week, like 46,000 people just lost their jobs or were about to lose their jobs over a period from some of the big companies. So we want to see what we can do there. And Seattle's, there's a lot of exciting new opportunities, but there's also people that need help. So we want to kind of find some way to kind of support that. We've got a few ideas we're knocking around. Another big thing, VR. We're going with that this year. This is quietly, people are making some decent money in VR gaming now, and the whisper is, you've just had some new hardware out. PlayStation's going to come out. PSVR 2 is coming out soon, and the whisper is that Apple might finally be throwing their hat, their visor into the ring in this space this year. Could be
Indeed, and once again revolutionise gaming.
Well, I do want to say that if we want to look into the future, I'll do a little bit of a shameless plug for you because you're all too modest to do it. It will be in Seattle. That will be the next chapter to this.
Well, between now and PGC Seattle, we're also going to be hosting an evening event in San Francisco during GDC. We've got the Mobile Games Awards that we do every year, which we'll be hosting in London at BAFTA 195 Piccadilly in April. And then after Seattle, we'll be taking the whole Pocket Gamer Connects roadshow to Toronto, and then Helsinki, and then back to the Middle East with Jordan again. So there's plenty lined up there. That we do a lot of travel, and in fact, we do take the work on the road, and we're mindful of the environmental impact on that. And so we've actually partnered this year with Games Forest to encourage the games industry to do what they can to reduce the impact on the environment and protect forests around the world. There's actually a Pocket Gamer forest in Peru that we've donated some money towards, and that we're encouraging our attendees to make donations to. And as part of the Games Forest Club that we're in now through our events, we're encouraging our attendees to do what they can to offset their environmental impact and be mindful of ecological factors. So have a look at gamesforest.club, or via the Pocket Gamer Connects website. You can see ways to donate to that charity, to to offset some of the travel impact of the event.
At this last event and going forward, and Brian, you'll be there too. Going there with videographers, doing video podcasts on site. It's one thing, of course, it's part of a sponsor package, but I took us sort of out onto the floor and picked up on some great stories, including your Indies winner, one of the Indies winners. So, got the vibe, got some great stories that we'll also be bringing to the podcast series as well. So I just like to say thanks for such a lively conversation, really sharing. And as you said, Chris, you're getting a little soppy. I feel like I'm part of a tribe. I think you've also told us
you are
I am
part
of the tribe. There you go. Now, what can be better than that?
And we are back after that segment. Let me move us on to Daniel Helmhold, VP of Growth, Head of Marketing at Big Fish Games. He tells us all about brand, how to build one to last. More importantly, how to build one and see the impact on the bottom line. Take it away, Daniel.
It was meant to be. I'm looking for you. I'm thinking, man, I want to talk to Big Fish Games. Found you. Amazing. But what's really cool is what you do there. So tell me, in your own words, what you're doing at Big Fish Games.
Yeah, so my name is Daniel. I'm Big Fish's VP of Marketing. I head up growth at the organization. I've been there for about a year and a half. And my goal is to try and find ways to grow and scale our games, try and launch new games successfully, and really at the highest level, try and maximize the marketability of all games that we develop, publish, and release.
But you do something even cooler, because you are the personification of brand formats. You're the first person I have found who doesn't just talk about it being combined. That's your job now, right?
It is my job, and I think we've got some very unique schools of thought around brand versus performance. Mobile gaming has innovated on the performance side so incredibly well. It's driven a lot of the innovation technically and operationally around all of mobile. And at times it's easy to then leave brand behind as you get so focused on performance. And so a lot of my job is finding a way to remember that without building strong brands, the ability to market through performance marketing is going to be greatly degraded. And so I think a lot of our industry is recognizing this now as it gets harder and harder to target the users you want. The need to be able to build a brand that resonates with a broader set of players that aligns with that broader targeting is more important than ever. And you're seeing games who are recognizing the need to create stronger characters and interesting tones within their game that have marketing that really grab a consumer's attention and bring them in. And so our orientation is marketability doesn't start 2 months before you launch a game. It starts very early on with the concepting of a game and recognizing that if you don't bake in strong marketability and a strong brand from day one, by the time you get to launch, the things that you're going to want to change based on the data feedback loop are far too great to be able to execute at that time and way more expensive than had you set down the right path from step one.
What are the elements of marketability beyond the narrative that's going to really hook us?
Yeah, I mean, you can break, like in a lot of planning and strategy, you can break things down in their component pieces. So brand is this kind of large kind of element that's hard to kind of define. And so if you start to break it down into its component pieces, it starts to feel a little bit more accessible. So you can look at the things like your art style, you can look at your character base, you can look at your environments, you can look at the tone of your game. Is it dark or is it light? Is it playful? Is it comedic? And you start to break these individual elements down and you recognize that together they make a brand. But in each one, you can then start to optimize against each of those to recognize how they come together to create something cohesive, but also, are something that resonates with your users in each different element. And so we recognize that before there's a piece of software, we can go out and we can optimize and test against each of those. And then as our PowerPoint deck turns into an actual piece of software, then we have something we can put in front of consumers and continually check with them and recognize that play testing isn't just to say, is the game fun? It's to say, hey, what if we made this game? Now here's the game. Does what you just play align with what you just saw in the marketing materials? And we think more cohesively about how brand and development work together to build a game together, not development builds and then marketing comes in afterwards.
You have the advantage of understanding really the player types that it resonates with, because they're resonating with your brand as well. So you're getting to narrow a little bit of that targeting without, hey, just throwing on the wall and seeing what sticks.
That's the hope. I think we've all gotten a little spoiled by the granularity of targeting available to us in mobile marketing over the last 10 years. It's been fantastic. The granularity of targeting, of reporting, of attribution. These were amazing, amazing boons to us. Well, those are getting harder and harder. So while the targeting is still very strong, as it gets more difficult to find a specific user in a specific instance, that brand better be able to speak to more than one person effectively. So yes, we can segment and we can target them with a message that compels them, but it also drives us to come up with an overall more compelling message for when we don't have that targeting. We have to be able to do effectively more so as additional privacy regulation and other challenges come into our ability to go out and find a very specific user.
Now you're doing this at Big Fish Games. Can you give me a little bit of an example of track record, success to date, something you're really proud of? It's like, hey, man, we're nailing our brand identity.
Yeah, I mean, right now the game that we're most focused on is Evermerge. Evermerge has been out for about 2 years. It is a merge game. It is one of the innovators in merge, we believe, and what it's been able to do effectively is build a cast of characters that really resonates. We won, female game character of the year through Google. I guess it was last year, and we think that was because we were able to create a very strong female character that had high marketability, relatability, and it allowed us to create something that not only was compelling from a strong character perspective, but we knew players would actually interact with and consumers would interact with in terms of considering whether to play the game. And so much of strong marketing comes down to strong character development, and strong character development these days comes down to strong split testing. So we had a character, we split test not just the version of the character, but how we presented her in terms of trying to find ways to make her look like and appear as a more empowered female character in our game. And we think that really resonated well, and it's something that we can be proud of and have really strong performance.
And you asked the players as well.
Absolutely. I mean, this came from feedback from our players, showing them different versions of this character. And the best way to test is if you can go two ways. One, qualitatively asking them, do you like this? Do you like this? And then doing a split test within user acquisition and see there's what users want to say they want, and then there's also what they actually choose to engage with when put into the wild. And you really want to be able to assess both of them because they can give you unique, discrete insights into that.
Now you're doing this at Big Fish Games and you have a great name, right? A lot of companies, they're sort of on the cusp of having a name. It's not a thing for a garage indie, but it is something for mid-growing companies. Yeah. What are the signs for a game studio that's like, hey, you know what, we have to double down and think about our brand? I
think there's two brands that you're working with. One is your corporate brand, and that is more of a B2B asset and allows you to work with new partners and do publishing, and that is important. Consumers don't care so much about who's making the game. They care about the game brand. And for a small or an up-and-coming developer, focusing on that game brand is what's important. And I think within game development, there is a designer, there is an art director who is the de facto head of the brand until you have a brand marketing team at a certain level of scale. And that makes total sense. The biggest challenge is that person saying, I recognize that I have a vision for this game, but I also need to make sure there's a market for this game. And I will challenge my vision for the game by validating that the market actually aligns with my vision and being able to be humble enough to say, if I get feedback from the market, am I willing to change my vision so that I can have the chance at scaling my game to a real hit?
And that is the challenge because creative people, creative directors, it's hard enough to get performance creatives, let alone the exact game. What is your advice for that? Because that must be what you're doing in your team, correct?
It is. I mean, what we try and do is recognize that creative people need to be creative. And so what you do when you want to point people in a direction that's informed by data is you want to draw a box and say, what we need is people, we're going to define this box based on our insights about market, based on our segmentation, and based on our knowledge of what we believe is a scalable approach. So here's that box. Now, please go be creative within that space. And by directing creativity at a space that is pre-validated as having business opportunity, you let creatives still do what they're great at, but it's a much more productive use of everyone's time because you know you're already playing in the right area.
It's saying you allow people to be creative within the confines of what tells you is a commercial success.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, one of the most difficult things in gaming is to take the business side and the marketing side and the creative side and bring them together to find something that is quantitatively and creatively successful. And the number one way to do that is through strong communication. And as simple as that sounds, it's incredibly difficult. And those difficulties come from both sides. It comes from the marketing side, asking too much and not recognizing how difficult it is to make a game. And it comes from the game making side, not recognizing how important marketability is to the future success of their game. And that's where those conversations need to happen early and often.
What's the hardest advice you've ever had to take or give?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think for me, it's been the need to have humility and respecting that others are doing a job that's really difficult as well. As a non-technical person, I don't think I always recognize just how difficult it is to make a game. And I've worked with the GM who helped to educate me on just how hard what they were doing was. And it forced me to take a step back and realize that I need to recognize that what they're doing is as hard or harder than what I'm doing. And if I can get them to recognize the same thing about me, we will work a lot better together.
It's also, as you said, last question. I've read a lot of literature that talks about the impact of brand on uplift for a lot of different verticals, not just gaming. We talked about brand. What are you seeing, or what can you say to someone who might be on the fence about this, about what the results are going to be, what they're going to see? Can you share some of that, even the range that makes it worth the effort?
Well, I'd say first off, brand is this nebulous concept that when thought of in the abstract really doesn't resonate down to the impact. So put aside this whole intimidating concept of brand that has decades of weight and baggage attached to it, and think of it simply as this. When you're trying to acquire users, you're trying to get the lowest CPI possible. If brand can give you a 30% uplift in your conversion rate, and that can decrease your CPI by 30%, then that is not just going to allow you to spend 30% more. That's going to allow you to potentially spend 2-3x more, because that change in the formula means that your game only needs a 30% less LTV to return positive return on those users. So the idea of brand can be put over here. Let's just talk about making better assets that resonate with users, that make users cheaper, that let us scale your game more and more. And my hope is that resonates more than kind of the lofty ideal of brand in the abstract.
I would agree. You've demystified it. Very well done, Daniel. I want to thank you for taking the time, and above all, for sharing a playbook that other publishers can follow. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PG.Biz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Until then, I'm Brian Baglow.
I'm Peggy Salz, and that's a wrap until next week.